This video covers a backhand swipe by Al Jazeera Plus at Donald Trump's Build a Wall message from early in his presidential campaign. While virtually no one believes he meant an actual wall, Al Jazeera Plus has taken it literally in this piece entitled, "Why Walls Won't Secure the U.S.-Mexican Border." Here, our good friend Francesca Fiorentino walks us through the various holes in the border with Mexico, some literal, and makes the case that America cannot be secured by a wall and is not currently being secured by any of the means used by us, especially the Border Patrol. What's her solution? Nothing, of course. Al Jazeera's mission is to tar the U.S. with any brush it has handy, not to actually suggest any method of improving things. That's why I'm making these videos, to hold their lies up to the light and show this shit for the insulting propaganda it really is. With that said, let's get to it.
Welcome to the U.S.-Mexico border, a place of sweltering summers and a sweltering debate on immigration and national security. Oh, hey, look! There's already a wall!
There's already a wall. No, you lying bitch. There are sections of a wall. Look at your own Tohono video, and you'll see nothing but a 3-strand wire fence you can just duck right through. That's in the Border Patrol section with the highest crossing rate, too. Surely we don't need an increase in Border Patrol presence, Francesca. Do we?
And fences, and concrete barricades, and gunboats, and drones. And SUVs.
It's a 2,000-mile border in inhospitable terrain and weather. Did you think it should only be patrolled by boots on the ground?
The border is nearly 2,000 miles long. It includes uninhabited desert, major cities, and the Rio Grande River. We always hear about border security, and the U.S. spends billions every year on our so-called protection. But what's really going on here? Many things cross the border, from monarch butterflies to heroin, to people looking for a better life.
Not a problem. People come to America for a better life all the time. One question. Are we supposed to turn a blind eye to illegal immigration simply because some of the crossers aren't necessarily bad people? They're criminals as soon as they cross that line, Francesca. It's easier to turn them back at the border before they can hide in plain sight in immigrant communities, thus making it harder to find them and send them back.
93% of the cocaine consumed in the U.S. comes in through this border, having made its way from South America. That, along with marijuana and methamphetamines, are smuggled through tunnels, on lightweight planes, in car tires, even shot over the border in t-shirt cannons.
So once again, Francesca makes the point for more border enforcement. I guess tunnels, lightweight planes, etc. show how a wall in and of itself is ineffective, which is why Trump is in favor of greater enforcement of current laws. Just look at how the Border Patrol is instrumental in intercepting tons of illegal drugs and millions in dirty cash every year.
When the U.S. is the largest market in the world for illegal drugs, there's always a way in.
You're absolutely right. Our demand for illicit drugs is the reason this is happening in the first place. I personally believe legalizing most of the drugs which are smuggled in would obviate a very large part of this problem, but that's not a complete answer by any means. There's still a lot to be done regarding America's drug habit.
Then there are guns, which flow the other way. Every year, an average of 253,000 firearms bought in the U.S. cross into Mexico. And the insane amount of gun dealers on the U.S. side make that really easy. There's 3 per mile.
Gun smuggling is a huge problem for Mexico, with 75% of illegally imported firearms from the U.S. coming from Texas, Arizona, and California. Drug traffickers are the main recipients, using strawman buyers to make seemingly legal purchases, though they are actually on behalf of the criminals. This is a felony, but difficult to enforce, as the ATF has not instituted digital record keeping for gun dealers, thus making tracking such purchases virtually impossible. So as you can see, this is not so much a Border Patrol problem as it is an ATF problem.
There are dozens of official entry points along the border. Lines and increased security mean it can take hours to get from Juarez to El Paso, a distance of less than a mile.
This congestion is the direct result of 9/11, Francesca. A number of popular crossings were closed because of security concerns. Maybe you'll mention that little bit of info in one of your later videos, Probably not.
Though many people cross every day for work, school, or vacation, we mostly hear about illegal crossings.
Why would anyone give one scintilla of a fuck about legal crossings? False equivalence much?
It's hard to be exact about how many cross. Most of what we know is based on how many people the Border Patrol apprehends, and that number has actually been decreasing.
Several major reasons for that, Francesca. 1. Increased border security. But that's not possible according to you, is it? 2. There are so many illegal aliens in the U.S. now that new illegals have little chance of finding work, and even the most basic of labor jobs at that. Supply and demand hits everyone, no? And 3. Even if you can find work, it's also harder to get hired due to increased restrictions on hiring employees without proper identification. Would a quote-unquote wall make this decline even larger? Most probably. How is that a bad thing?
But crossing the border illegally means a lot more than just waiting. It means walking for days on end under the sun over some rugged terrain. It means exhaustion and dehydration. Some migrants hire what are called coyotes to help them across the border, but those coyotes sometimes have ties to the drug trade, and rape and abuse are common. In the last decade, thousands have been found dead while attempting to cross the border.
Lots to cover here. First, imagine it being downright dangerous to violate a sovereign border. How mean of the U.S. not to lay down a red carpet for your so-called migrants. Poor little darlings. Maybe we could use all of those Border Patrol vehicles to waft these unfortunates to the state of their choice. Would that make it all better? While we're at it, that might also put those nasty coyotes out of business. Heaven forbid people would stop hiring these bastards and risking their lives and the lives of loved ones by trusting professional criminals. Lastly, almost 4,000 deaths is indeed tragic and completely not America's fault. No one told them to come here illegally, across miles and miles of desert, and to expect it to be a cakewalk. Just because Qatar has to lie to foreign workers about plentiful, well-paying jobs to be able to enslave them once they've arrived, doesn't mean the U.S. is to blame for people dying while coming in illegally.
If they do make it across, they face an entire apparatus of Customs and Border Patrol, the largest federal enforcement agency in the nation. It is equipped with guns, drones, towers, ground sensors, helicopters, gunboats, and dogs to police the border in what some consider militarization rather than security.
Fuck you, Francesca. Heaven forfend the government uses any and all of the equipment in its inventory to secure the border and protect the lives of its enforcement personnel who deal with dangerous people every goddamn day. What would you consider proper equipment to secure the border? Barbed wire and tin cans filled with gravel? Plus, and I can't believe I have to keep repeating this, not every illegally crossing individual is Mary Poppins. Some actual criminals, like coyotes and drug runners, are found on U.S. soil, and these people do not want to get captured. Maybe this doesn't fit your narrative, Francesca, but 124 Border Patrol agents have died in the line of duty since the service's inception. To be sure, not all of them died during an arrest, but does that even matter? Should they only be allowed to wear khaki cargo pants, a polo shirt, a pith helmet, and SPF 50 while carrying a walking stick for self-defense?
Look, it's a border surveillance blimp.
That blimp is used as an airborne radar platform to search for those light planes you mentioned earlier. Light planes which carry drugs north every night. Is the Border Patrol supposed to use surface-to-air missiles, or would big flashlights be more your speed?
The budget for this increased by 75% in the last decade to $13.5 billion a year.
So what? What's your point? Oh, I forgot. You don't have to have one as long as it sounds bad for the U.S. government.
Together with what the U.S. spends on ICE, that's more money than the DEA, the FBI, and the Secret Service combined.
A nice apples to oranges comparison, Francesca. Why have the ICE and CPB budgets gotten so large? Again, fucking 9/11. Besides, the Border Patrol is still understaffed and not a lot of people are interested in wearing the uniform. It's very tough, dangerous work, so you have to offer a competitive wage plus a bonus in order to attract recruits. The FBI, DEA, and Secret Service can take their picks of applicants since there's always a surplus. Not so with the Border Patrol.
Between 2004 and 2015, the number of border agents more than doubled. The CBP operates in what the U.S. considers border territory, which is anything 100 miles from the border itself. Here, anyone can be stopped on reasonably suspicious grounds, even if they're a citizen.
What is the problem? Citizens shouldn't be stopped because they are above reproach? Who the fuck do you think commits the vast majority of smuggling over controlled border crossings? Anyone who buys into this shit should leave the country right now.
It's all part of a strategy to stop border crossing through deterrence. The idea that the more people fear crossing, the less likely they are to do it. That might work if you don't mind what it implies. More danger, more deaths, and a ripe market for human smuggling.
So, the solution is no deterrence? Okay, what does Sharia law say about dealing with crime? Support for the poor to help them stay out of trouble? Understanding of the circumstances that caused the law to be broken and showing mercy? Or chopping off the hands of thieves, throwing gays off buildings, and stoning adulterers to death? I guess deterrence is only okay when you do it. Also, what is this more danger, death, and smuggling crap? How does reducing smuggling and illegal crossings result in more problems? What kind of fucked up math is that?
But is it actually keeping America safer? Despite Trump and other politicians' claims, ISIS isn't coming across the southern border. There has yet to be a single apprehension of someone with links to the Islamic State.
Yeah, Trump's among the first to worry about terrorists coming over the southern border. For the 100th time, Francesca, 9/11. That aside, I guess you missed this little piece of news. A dozen Middle Eastern men, Palestinians, Pakistanis, plus an Afghan man who was connected to a terror attack supposed to occur in either the U.S., Canada, or possibly both, were picked up after illegally crossing the border. Anything to say about that? Yeah, I thought so.
The current wall covers just 653 miles of the border and has already cost the U.S. $7 billion, $5 million per mile in some areas. Experts estimate that to cover the entire border with a wall would cost $25 billion, and that's not even including labor.
Ah, another shot at Trump. He really scares the shit out of you, doesn't he? Yes, I know. He scares the shit out of a lot of people everywhere. Let's go along with the he meant a literal wall narrative. Of course, a wall over the entire stretch of the border would be incredibly, almost insurmountably expensive. However, how much are we spending on the Border Patrol annually? A cost you just bitched about. That number would certainly be reduced by a long wall, as I like to refer to it. Plus, it would cut down on illegal trafficking in both drugs and humans. Deterrence, remember? Also, you don't have to build the whole thing in one shot. It's easy enough to start with the worst areas, then work your way out. Even better, it won't be necessary to cover every mile of border. There are some areas where crossing is too difficult and or dangerous, or where so little traffic goes through that a wall isn't even needed.
There are logistical hurdles, too. Because of treaties the U.S. has signed with Mexico, it can't build on the Rio Grande floodplains. And much of the border in Texas is privately owned, and not everyone wants a giant wall in their backyard.
Because these are floodplains, building a wall there would be detrimental to the local ecosystem. This area is fairly concentrated and more easily patrolled by mounted Border Patrol agents, so sticking one along this part of the border is not really needed. As for those not wanting a wall in their backyard, they don't feel all that safe when illegals cross their property night after night, so maybe you're a bit off base here.
So, even with all the money in the world and our very own Great Wall of America, can we ever stop movement across the border by force? And will it make us safer?
Yes, properly applied deterrence, including enforcement of current border policies and criminal statutes, which is what Trump's wall really is, will make Americans safer. People like you, however, can fuck off and die. Another tour de force by Francesca Fiorentino. Give her a hand, folks. Using deterrence as a synonym for force, forgetting how many things she's bitching about are the direct result of 9/11, equating no ISIS members being captured with not catching any terrorists, referring to illegal immigrants as migrants. She's a one-woman wrecking crew for truth in journalism. It's bad enough when she shits on this country, but then wrapping herself in the same flag she's trying to light on fire, I have no use for her or her so-called news stories. Here's the worst part. There's still 2 more of these abortions to go. Toughen up, cowboys. It's not over yet. And now, an anecdote. Recently I attended a nephew's soccer match at a nearby university. We parked as closely as we thought we could to the field, but it turned out we were almost as far away as possible. I need handicap parking, and if we had asked the right person, we would have been directed to it. This is important because as we got to the field and to the bleachers, I was exhausted. I could barely move my legs. I still had to climb up the steps, however, to get to our section of the bleachers. So I started the long, grueling climb upward and thought, okay, this is where we're sitting. Cut over to our section of the bench and realized I had stopped 2 rows too far down. So instead of walking to the middle of the aisle and going up the steps like a sane person would, I decided I would combat crawl up the benches themselves and get to our section 2 rows up. As soon as I started to move, my exhausted legs gave out and I barked one of my shins very hard against the metal edge of the bench I was on top of at the moment. It hurt like hell. And of course, when something happens like that, when you're startled, when you're in pain, you cry out. Some people will say, ouch. Some people will say, oh, that hurt. I, on the other hand, will say, Jesus fucking Christ. After I did that, I happened to turn and look down towards the field, and I saw a gentleman sitting in the front row, looking very sternly at me. I thought, well, I deserve that, and I crawled up the rest of the way and got to our section of the bleachers. As I sat down, I realized everyone was standing and looking off into the distance. I stood up and looked in the direction they were looking and saw the American flag flying in the wind. And then I heard faint strains of a song that I knew quite well. It was the national anthem. It was about 4 bars into it, and I hadn't been able to hear it because of all the clanking and groaning I had done getting up to my section of the bleachers. I put my head over my heart and sang along with the rest of the anthem, and then sat down and waited for the game to start. We lost, but it was a fun time. Normally the story would end here. I hurt myself, cursed out loud, and got a stern look from someone who didn't appreciate that kind of language. But it did not end there. There's more to the story. First of all, this was a Catholic university. So not only did I take the Lord's name in vain, if you go for that kind of thing, which I don't, I insulted the university's ultimate mascot. Take it a step further, it was September 10th. The entire university was commemorating the anniversary of 9/11 that weekend. So I managed to curse in front of people who didn't appreciate it, take the Lord's name in vain at a Catholic university, and spit on the remembrance of those who fell on 9/11 in one shot. I consider it my finest hour. Thank you for your attention.